Welcome everyone to EA Global Summit 2021. This is Juhi from EA Global Summit organizing team. Firstly, thanks to everyone for your interest and support. This session is by Daniel Siegel from Lieber and Nizam from Prolaborate, presenting this session about seamless versioning and collaboration for agile modeling with EA. Kindly note that we will be muting all the participants throughout the session, and if any of you are having any questions during and after the session, please use the chat window or questions window to drop your questions. The speakers will answer during the Q&A session at the end. To enable collaboration and communication with Daniel, Nizam, and also with other EA practitioners after the session, we request you to visit our meeting room in MS Teams. The link to the MS Teams channel is posted in the chat window for your quick reference. If anyone is having any difficulty in connecting to Teams, please reach us in the chat window or drop an email to registrations@eaglobalsummit.com. Thanks once again for your interest and support to EA Global Summit 2021. Looking forward to another informative session with Daniel and Nizam in this year's summit. Over to you, Nizam.
Thank you, Juhi. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining this session. So in this session, we'll be looking at how enterprise architecture modeling practice could be really fitting into the agile paradigm, how we could have seamless versions or iterative builds be delivered as a modeling tool, maximizing the value out of the models, at the same time keeping intact of the versions, the branches, and the parallel work that's happening in an agile environment, and how to engage the right stakeholders from different teams to utilize the model and give inputs at the same time. So we'll be starting with a quick look at what's the tool or the platform that we are using. So we have the Sparx platform, which includes the Enterprise Architect modeling tool, the Cloud server, which helps us integrate with the other enterprise architecture landscape tools, and Prolaborate, which is the collaboration platform, which sits right on top of it. And we'll be using the Lemon Tree from Lieber, which is an innovative versioning tool that fits into the architecture platform from Sparx Systems to help us integrate with Git and help us with dynamic versioning and multi-way merges that are inevitable for iterative modeling environment. So just taking a deeper dive into the architecture platform very quickly, it's all the crux of the platform still resides in Enterprise Architect, which is the modeling tool that supports SysML, UML, and a variety of architecture modeling standards. But the tool has evolved itself into a comprehensive platform by opening it up through the REST API powered by PCS and a web platform that sits on top of it to curate, simplify, and publish models through graphs and charts and dashboards to a wider stakeholders, and also integrating with various other tools in enterprise landscape, such as Jiras and Jamas and Doors and ServiceNows and Confluences, and also be readily available as a PaaS or a SaaS offering in cloud. So the Sparx platform has evolved itself into a space like this. And the Lemon Tree from Lieber, which is represented by Daniel in this session, is a tool that has been squarely fitting onto this architecture platform to help maximize the value of this platform, at the same time continue the DevOps practices that most of the software engineering and system engineering teams have as a regular practice, to have iterative builds and regular releases happening in a short span of time. So I would request Daniel to add a word or two on this before I move on.
We see with more and more customers that they want to adapt agile processes, and if you want to adapt agile processes, at some point you will have the need for the capability to branch and merge in order to fulfill your quality goals. And also the branching and merging is tremendously helpful if you want to onboard other people that are not so experienced in modeling, because they can have their own model to work with and then continue later on.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. That kind of segues into the challenges slide that I had. And Daniel exactly touched on the change management, which is one of the key challenges that we see in an architectural practice, where we would have multiple teams working in parallel, creating models or making changes to them. And we need a coherent and harmonious way to keep these branches in sync and merge them together. So versioning, there are multiple ways to do versioning, but the lemon trees approach is to integrate with Git, which is a tool of choice for many teams, and that's what Daniel just mentioned about. And what are the other challenges that we usually see when setting up or scaling up a EA practice? Firstly, there is a lot of information in a variety of different ways, like Excels and Words and PowerPoints, and we have we have the Enterprise Architect tool that is built to bring all this into a central repository. At the same time, we need the people who are beyond this EA community to look at the EA models, to make use of it, to take decisions, or to give us feedback. That engagement has been a barrier to entry or barrier to adaptability in the past, but we have the right tools in the mix now to make sure we are able to simplify and share this model information. So there are some imminent challenges that we are addressing through this platform, and this is just to highlight them. And in this particular session, we will be focusing especially on how Enterprise Architect models, which, as we all know, could be a really comprehensive, standard-driven modeling environment, can be powered using the Prolaborate and Lemon Tree to A, publish and share and engage the wider audience, and B, using Lemon Tree to have advanced Git-based model versioning to enable smooth change management. So this will be the crux of this session. There are multiple other sessions and webinars which focuses on each of these tools individually, and also various other features of Sparx platform and Prolaborate. But in this session, we'll have a use case that shows how we can take an EA model, publish it to the wider users, let them make the changes, and how we use Lemon Tree to merge these changes from multiple branches into one, the prod environment without much ado, and a seamless multi-way merge. So that will be the primary use case that we'll be focusing on. So I'll be looking at primarily the Prolaborate aspect, and I'll pass it on to Daniel to delve into the Lemon Tree or the versioning aspect of it. So to start with Prolaborate, there are 4 compelling use cases that Prolaborate solves for the Enterprise Architect users. Firstly, it's about having a better focus by keeping it minimal and focused for the stakeholders, rather than exposing the entire model with the whole raft of architectural information and systems engineering models and software engineering models. We can just pick and choose the right parts of the model that needs to be shown, and even those model information, without being shown as is, we can simplify the details that they get to see. For example, a BPMN business process will have 1 million tagged values out of the box, but a business user or an end user would be interested to see a couple of them or a handful of them. And Prolaborate gives us that ability to simplify that view for the intended stakeholders. And it also helps us curate the model information in terms of graphs and charts and roadmaps and dashboards, so that people have it all handy and in a web browser as well. But the main use case that I'm going to focus on today is the engagement part. And why is engagement part so important? It's been, I've been, in the Sparx world for the last 15 years or so, and I've been working with a number of teams implementing EA practice, building models. But a point at which we really have a big challenge in, getting the acceptance from the wider teams is when we want to share this model to the rest of the team. Conventionally, we used to publish them as PDFs and words and share to them. But with everyone moving towards digital documents and live views, it's becoming a lot more imperative to have a live and real-time view of the model. At the same time, having all these simplification and curation packed with it. And we also have the right tools to engage them. So we could just send them a link and invite them to share the comments, or we could have some structured reviews that we can set up to make sure we get the right inputs from the teams. So I will not be looking at the rest of the use cases in this session. I'll be only focusing on the engagement part, because the use case that we have chosen for this session is there is a EA model, there is a branch of an EA model where we have put together a couple of requirements and use cases and some structural designs, and we want to engage the requirements engineering team and the product owners team and the use cases engineering team to make sure they give us the right feedback and make the model changes, and how we use Lemon Tree to consolidate those changes and merge them together. So to kind of delve into that particular aspect, I'm going to elaborate on the engagement part. And when we talk about engagement, we are not talking about adding another user into the EA repository and asking them to browse through the model. Whilst that is the ideal use case, we all know that EA is a very comprehensive tool, but at the same time, the rigor and the learning curve required to get comfortable with Enterprise Architect is not always expected from the business users or the non-EA stakeholders. So we would see how to take the EA model that has all the information, but present it to a non-EA user using Prolaborate's review. And when we talk about engaging, conventionally, people always think about just sharing the diagram. So, we are always seeing Confluence pages and SharePoint pages where an EA diagram is pasted. Whilst looking at the diagram is an engagement model, we have multiple stakeholders who have different interests in EA models. So the end users, or the last people in the line who just want to look at the diagram could use any of these mediums, so Confluences or SharePoints. But people who really have to interact with the model, who have to interact with the modelers, give active feedback, and make sure the model is refined as per their expectation, will have different engagement types. Firstly, it could be the review and sharing feedback and giving us the approvals, but we can also use Prolaborate to request the team to update our model details. Let's say I jot down a couple of requirements and use cases in a BA workshop, in a requirements workshop, but I would like to have more details about those requirements, more details about those use cases. And I don't want to, send an Excel spreadsheet to get them to complete those things. Rather, I could model them in EA and engage them using Prolaborate so that they could key in those details. They could set the statuses, they could set the tag values, they could set the notes, everything through a web browser and through a very simplified interface. So an engagement also involves updating model details, but even more advanced engagement would involve creating and updating models and diagrams as well. For example, you have people from the QA team or the team leads who kind of figure out that there are missing links in your use cases, or there are missing requirements, or there are missing blocks or attributes. They could also switch to a EA model or an EA diagram through Prolaborate and the web browser and make model changes. So we will be looking at how these three different engagement models are enabled through Prolaborate, and each of these changes will be handled in the Lemon Tree part of it as well, where we see there will be conflicts and multiple updates which will be merged into a prod environment. So there will be three different types of engagement that we are going to look at. Conventionally, reviews is all about publishing our models as a Word or a PDF, and then email those as documents, and then getting people to reply to emails, and then again have another spreadsheet to maybe keep track of all the comments. update the model, and then publish, and this cycle just goes on. It's one of the long and time-consuming ways to use the model information. And as you may already know, Prolaborate and the modern review tools built on top of the modeling environments has now changed the way reviews are done, and we'll be having a closer look at that. And the current way it works is, as we keep modeling, we will be able to engage people to look at the live models, provide review feedback on live models, update them in a parallel way, in a collaborative way through web browsers or through EA clients, and seamlessly merge them into the production environment as well. So this is a seamless experience that we can expect using all the tools that are in the Sparx platform, and complemented by products such as Lemon Tree. So now, just to set context before I switch to the demo, I'm going to look at a team where there is a person who is the model administrator. Let me just put my name on it, and then let's assume there are two teams. One under Beth, where there's Andy and Dave, and then another team under Claire, where Felix and Gina. And the top layer are the product owners, and the second layer are the requirement engineers in this case. And what I want to do is, I want to look at a EA model like this. So this is a view of the actual EA model behind, which will be familiar for people who are comfortable with EA, but we are talking about people who are kind of oblivious to the EA's nuances. They haven't been through the trainings to go through the learning curve to understand EA. So the role of a model administrator is to make sure these people are engaged to look at these and give us the feedback and approval, and even further, maybe even update this model information as required. So what I'm going to do in this demo is set up a review which is primarily focusing on requirements, and I'm going to engage Beth and her team to do the requirements review. At the same time, I'm going to set up another review for Claire and her team to look at the use cases and update its nodes. So I have just jotted down a couple of use cases, but they are pretty much blank, and I want Claire and her team to review those use cases, update the nodes, and make sure it's complete. They are happy with the way it's connected to the actors, to the requirements, and to the context items. And this is a role that I, as a modeler, I'm going to play. And with this, what we are going to look at is a couple of actions, which I would request you to focus on while I'm walking through the demo. Firstly, how am I going to set up separate reviews for requirements and use cases and engage these teams individually and give them right permissions? And then how Andy does a requirements review using a web browser and looking at the model information in a much more simplified manner. And then how he notifies to Beth on something that he thinks must be updated and how Beth responds to it. And then we'll also look at how Felix looks at his view of Prolaborate, looks at the use case review that he has been assigned, and then updates the descriptions. And he also goes further, analyzes the model and understands there's a change that's required, and he adds that as a comment. And then the model administrator comes back, looks at these comments, makes those EA changes through a web platform again, like through EA SaaS, and how it all gets updated into this branch of EA model that will be merged into the production model in the next phase, in which Daniel will be walking us through. So the demo with the context now set, I'm going to walk through the demo. And to start with, I'm going to quickly look at the EA model that we are going to use for this the whole use case demonstration. And you could see there are requirements captured, and these requirements are connected to use cases as you would expect. And as I switch to a use case diagram, we have the actors, the boundary, the blocks, and the interconnections between them. And then we also have the more detailed design that you would expect in a systems engineering context, such as the block diagrams and the internal block diagrams. So I'm just going to switch from this diagram to the blocks and internal block diagrams to demonstrate that this is a well-connected EA model. It's not just a couple of diagrams randomly created. This is a well-connected EA model which has blocks, internal blocks, and these blocks are connected to your use cases. Your use cases are connected to your requirements. So such is a model that we as modelers would come up with. But then now comes the end user's view of it. So instead of showing them the whole big fat EA repository with all these folders, so this is the model administrator's view in Prolaborate, and even he only sees the thumbnails of the diagram that he is assigned to, or he could look at a custom designed dashboard that specifically focuses on the things that is expected to be seen. And now I'm starting with setting up a review. First part, I'm going to do a requirements review where Prolaborate allows us to have custom workflows defined. So it's a gated review with a definitive start date and an end date. And we could optionally have an approval workflow, which follows after the reviews and changes are done as well. And then it's as simple as browsing through your model information through Prolaborate and just picking and choosing the items that you would like to be reviewed, and then choosing the users or user groups from your existing user base and setting the right roles for them. In this case, I'm setting Beth as an approver. And once I'm done with it, the requirements review is set up. And similarly, I'm going to do another review. In this case, I'm going to set up a use case based review. And I'm going to have another start date and end date. But this time, instead of engaging Beth's team, I'm going to engage Claire's team. And as you could see, it's a matter of selecting the items quickly from the tree and choosing the users and assigning the right roles. And the next moment, a review is set up. And what this review does is it will immediately notify Andy, Beth, Claire, and Felix through emails and in-app notifications that there is a review being set. So as Andy logs in to Prolaborate, the first thing he will see is a reminder saying, hey, there is a requirements review for which you've been assigned. And just clicking on that will take him to a dedicated review dashboard, which only shows them the items that are pending his review and the status of this review, where what has other reviewers done and what are the feedback that has been shared by other reviewers. So a transparent way to look at the reviews and other people's input, and also a very simplified way to look at the requirements. So you could see that you are looking at the same requirements that are in EA, but instead of going through multiple packages and browsing through them, all Andy is doing is looking at the notes and description and providing a go-ahead, or if he thinks there is a concern, he just posts it as a comment, and not just post it as a comment, he also tags the users who needs to pay attention to it. So he tags Beth and posts a comment. And now what we would expect is, as expected, all reviewers and Beth will be sent an email to say, hey, there's a comment on this review, and an in-app notification also. So as Beth logs in, she sees the comment and she knows what Andy doesn't know. So she just updates or replies to it. And this again will, if you go back to Andy's view, he will see that in the notification. And then as he clicks on it, he will be taken to the comment straight away. And now within a few exchanges, that to real-time exchanges, the issue that Andy had has been resolved. Comparing this to publishing Word documents, emails, and consolidating that is, this is way too simplified and easy. And Andy also updates the status of that requirement. Now, switching back to the moderator's view, the moderator has even more control on this, where the moderator's dashboard for review shows what are people working on. So we have got Andy, Beth, and Claire who were invited for this. And then he could see how many comments have been posted, what is the status of those, etc. Now switching to Felix view, and as you could see, when he signs in, he is looking at the use case review instead of the requirements review, because he was assigned to a particular review. So he doesn't see what Andy sees. And now he is going and updating the use cases through Prolaborate. And these changes all gets updated to the underlying repository instantly. And if he thinks he need to look at the diagram in which this use case was documented, it's just about going from the description to the diagram. And he notices that there is a link that is missing for one of these use cases, and he just adds it as a comment, and he tags the user who set up this review to make sure he is notified of this comment. So it's as simple as looking at your model information through your browsers and using any of your modern collaboration tools. But what you need to notice is that he or she is using the same model information that we are seeing from EA model as well. And he's also saying, hey, there is a missing actor link, in the review comment as well. And now switching back to Nizam, who originally set up this review, and he is also notified of Felix's comment via an email. So he goes to the moderator's dashboard of the use case review. So he could see both reviews appear for the moderator because he has utmost control on what's happening. What is the progress, and he could even trigger reminders to these people if need be. And then he just scrolls down, looks at the comments that are open and that needs attention, and just a click on one of these graphs will open the actual discussion. So he sees that the use case is missing an actor link and not having the associated requirements. And then he sees which diagram is Felix talking about. Just a click and it takes him to the live diagram. He notices that there is a missing link. And the key here is he just clicks on edit button from Prolaborate, and what it does is it quickly opens the EA editor in the same browser. So he is not expected to go install an application and make the change. You could see I'm still in the Chrome browser where I just clicked on a comment, looked at the diagram, and then clicked edit. And you have the EA opened in a SaaS environment in the same browser. So to know more about EA SaaS, there is another session tomorrow that details on this particular aspect. But what you are seeing now is this is a fully 100% enterprise architect thick client application that you would expect in a normal environment with all the tools and toolboxes and utilities that you would expect to use. And using this, the model author is creating the connector. He is looking at the traceability information. He is navigating to the requirements package and creating a new requirement. As you know, the comment from Felix was that this particular use case doesn't have any requirement associated to it. So such is the power of having people contributing to the model. So the model author, who is responsible for creating this model, is also able to interact with them on a real-time basis, make model changes instantly, and have them to look at these changes almost in a real-time manner. So Nizam goes, creates a requirement, populates its details using EA. He's setting the ID and description or whatnot, and then he also goes back to the use case diagram where we would expect this use case to be connected to that requirement. And as you could see, I'm just taking a little time here to demonstrate that we are having a normal EA interface. But the key here is this is working on a central repository hosted in a remote cloud location, but it's really fast. So you could see that there's very minimal latency even while working on a remote environment. And that's a key problem that the SaaS solution addresses. Again, a quick note that there is a session tomorrow on this particular feature. But just coming back to this, I am connecting my use case to the requirement, and then I think, okay, this requirement is not necessary in this diagram because the connection is already done. So in summary, to this model, Andy has updated the status of the requirement. Felix has updated the notes of this use case, and Nizam has made a diagram change, and the diagram change is instantly seen in this branch of Prolaborate. You could see the diagram change that I made in EA was almost instant. Just the next refresh, you could see that. And Nizam goes back and replies to Felix's comment saying, hey, this has been updated. And once that is done, Felix would be notified via email that there is a comment on his review feedback. And when he goes back, he'll be able to look at the updated EA diagram and the updated connectivity. So just scrolling back to Felix's view, where you could see he sees Nizam's comment shown in in-app notifications and via normal emails, and he looks at it, goes back to the use case for which he added a comment, and he looks at the actual comment or reply from Nizam, and he wants to double check the diagram. He goes back to the diagram from there, and he looks at the connector being updated. So this kind of completes the scenarios that I wanted to establish on how Prolaborate is used to demonstrate these use cases. Now, I want to pass it to Daniel, who would show the second part of this, where these changes are in a branch, and how would this be merged back to the prod environment, and also address the conflicts is something that Daniel will walk us through now.
Okay, do you see the correct screen?
Yes, Daniel.
Okay, so let's take it to Planet Lemon Tree. Nizam already said Agile, and I really like this picture so much. We hear so many people when there's discussion about starting Agile development and so on. We need to make stand-ups. I can see a stand-up meeting every day when I drive by construction sites. So this is not a concept that is totally new, but it's applied in many industries. But modeling seems to lack a little bit, and people really need to get on board to meet today's demands with Agile modeling, because when you want to do Agile product development, you also need to be able to do Agile modeling, and therefore you will need branches. And another driver why people need version control, strict version control for their models, is very often norms or regulations. This is an example from the IEC 61508, where you can clearly read in the norm that you need to store all development artifacts in a version control system with a revision index and so on. And for example, the ISO 2622, which is very famous in the automotive world, is derived from this norm. So this is like the master norm. And we see more and more regulatory requirements that force people also to store models in version control systems. And as we have seen, Nizam and his team worked on our model. So they used Prolaborate to edit the model, and they did some changes to it. I also did some changes, and this will create not a problem, but something that is hard to solve with other tools. There will be a merge required to make one consistent model again. And this is exactly where Lemon Tree comes in. It has a three-way different merge capability for models, and therefore can be used to resolve or merge the model that on one hand my crew changed in Git and Nizam's crew changed on Prolaborate in a ProCloud environment. This is also very interesting and might be a bit of a shock for some of you, but if you think it through, it gets rather easy and straightforward. The best practice that we see with our customers for working with software development or models or to get end models also in MBSE is Git flow. What does Git flow mean? Basically, you have a develop branch. The develop branch is like our baseline, our current set of development. And whenever we do a release, we merge the develop into the master branch. The master is like the product we ship. And whenever somebody gets a task to develop something, a feature branch is created. And this gives you a lot of flexibility, because if you don't want to publish the feature right now, you can keep the feature branch for a longer time. Also, as we mentioned before already, this is a very good functionality if you want to onboard new people. You want to have the ability to review their changes to the model before you actually have them live available, and everybody on Prolaborate sees the stuff immediately that the unexperienced guy has done. It's something from my consulting experience that creates a lot of acceptance problems if people get blamed because they didn't know better and so on. And if they have their own feature branch, which is like a shelf copy, it's a very safe environment. They can propose their changes and validate them with an experienced modeler before the feature branch is merged back. In our specific case, we have an special solution or a new solution built, which means whenever I merge a feature branch into my develop, it will automatically be published on the Pro Cloud server. And as you can see here, I have a review branch, the yellow one, and I do some changes in Git. So there's also some reviewing happening in Git. And then we can merge the review changes from Prolaborate, Pro Cloud server, and the Git people into one and publish it as a new develop, as a new baseline. And this is really cool features, because if you have many business users collaborating on the model in Prolaborate, you might not necessarily want all the changes to be live immediately. It might make sense that an experienced modeler reviews the changes, consolidates, kind of like a model curator. And this gives you a very good opportunity to conduct this type of work. If you look at the architecture or at the components involved, for one, there's a local Git repository on the client computer. The other component is a Git server. In our example, we use a public GitHub hosted in the cloud, but it can be something else. You could also use Subversion, or we have customers using PTC Lifecycle Manager for it. And the last component is that we use a build server, a continuous integration solution, to publish the model using database scripts in a console application to the Pro Cloud server. But you can do the same with project transfer that is embedded in Enterprise Architect. This is just a clever way to integrate it in a continuous integration, or DevOps, how the new name is now, environment, to be able to publish the model on the Pro Cloud server. Okay, so now let's kick off the demo. So as I explained before, we host the EAPX in a GitHub on a public server. You can even clone this repository. It's not the private, it's a public repository. You can see there's branches going on, and I can certainly recommend experimenting with Git to get things started. And now this is the Git client of my choice. It's SmartGit. I have several feature branches. Their origin is the remote branches, and I'm currently in the develop branch, the main. Now I use the Git flow start feature. I call it review in Git, and I create a special branch for the review activity. The branch has been created, and it's because it's bold, you can see it's also the current working branch. I open the model, the PwC EAPX, and I will start to do some changes. And as you can see, I'm working in the same diagram Nissam changed in his Prolaborate environment. So hopefully there will be some conflicts. I create the new notes field with some text. Not the most creative text, but it's about the show. Next up, we will also modify the use case. This is where Nissam also changed the notes. So the note field is new, but this change will also affect Nissam. and I save the diagram, and we look at some other parts of the model, review some more parts. And now we have a special feature here because not every user wants to use Git. We have a little Git client inside Enterprise Architect where we have simplified operations for those people that are a bit shy of using Git, so they can collaborate in the Git way also in a simplified fashion. Now the model is committed and was pushed again to GitHub. We close the model now. And now comes the first real lemon tree use case. I select 2 branches, and we will double click on the EAPX, and lemon tree will automatically show up and show us the changes that happened in the model since we branched out. And when we look at it, it's clearly this activity control window where we moved some stuff away, and obviously our use case diagram where you can see in orange that we changed the control window movement, and in green that we introduced a new node. So this is just a feature how you can check historic versions with Lemon Tree. This also works with SVN or any other version control tool. It's just we show Git because it's the most common one. Now I start Lemon Tree as a desktop application because I want to show you the special integration with ProCloud Server. I choose a space, I choose the develop branch, and I choose the PWC exe from my current branch, which is the review branch. And now I choose a shortcut file saved by Enterprise Architect, which is basically just a simple way to enter an OLTP connection to a SQL server. You could also type in the OLTP connection string, and I hit on merge. Now Lemon Tree loads 2 models from EAPX files and 1 model from a SQL file. The SQL file is the same database that Nissan uses. And you can see here is a real conflict. We changed the same attribute of an element. And now I have this arrow, and I can decide, okay, I want to go with Nissan's solution, and the conflict is basically resolved. And I can also edit the text a little bit, should I want to. And after that, I confirm it, and now we have merged this conflict. This is the diagram changes, and you can see Lemon Tree has merged the diagram. Merging the diagram means the new connector introduced by Nissan, the green one, is here. And you can also see my change, the nodes was also introduced automatically. So in this case, despite being a conflict on the diagram edits, we would probably go with the automatic combined version that Lemon Tree suggests. I can take away the filter again on the top for the conflicted items, and we can highlight stuff in the diagram, and it will be highlighted in the project browser view on the top. So it's really, if you're used to Enterprise Architect, this feels really natural. And now we merge it into the PWC exe file, EAPX file that is in my branch. And we're basically done. What we have done now, we took all the changes from Nissan's Prolaborate editing that we've seen before and have it again in Git, currently as a local change. So I will write the commit command, a commit message. And I again can push it after the commit to the GitHub. And it's still in the commit in the branch, so it's still not published, it's not public. But now when I go here and say finish feature with the Git flow logic built into Smart Git, it will automatically be merged back into the develop. And as I explained before, we set up a continuous integration environment where a new version of the model in the continuous integration will always be published on the Prolaborate side of things. So now it has been moved to GitHub, and back to GitHub. to see that the changes are already in the cloud. And if you navigate to this URL, you can see the changes already that I did, and it's all here. So let's open up the model a little bit to check in Enterprise Architect if everything went well with the merges, and we are back in develop. And now we can also see the merge diagram inside Enterprise Architect with our nodes and the new connector introduced by Enterprise Architect. So everything seems to be cool. We can do some minor adjustments on the layout. And then we will save the diagram again. And we created, obviously, the next version of the EAP file. And we will do what we did before. We will do a commit and push. I know for those Git aware, I should not push on the develop, but for the sakes of the demo, I did it this time. And what happens now in the continuous integration environment is basically what you can do with project transfer. So it is the same logic. We copy database contents from an EAP or EAPX file into a SQL server. The password is shown here, but this is only on a local instance in a VM. Don't worry. So what happens now is this is our continuous integration server, TeamCity in this case, and I can see the changes, and it would run automatically, but we are impatient, so we click on run. On run, the continuous integration will collect the changes that occurred in Git and has a logic to check which changes occurred in the develop branch, and if the model changed in the develop branch, a console application that runs database scripts will be executed that basically updates our Prolaborate instance. So yes, if should changes occur in between the merge and this operation, they might be lost or would be lost, but this is simply the continuous integration part. So the experienced modelers working with Git are in charge of the model, and this only helps them to control what users see in Prolaborate, because the beauty of this solution is that in Prolaborate you always have a consistent state of the model. It's not any surprise, but it's really you can control when you communicate your model with the wider audience in the organization. And voila, we have the changes that we've seen before in Lemon Tree and Enterprise Architect now available on Prolaborate. And let's go to the last slide. Yeah, so if you think this is as interesting as we do, feel free to reach out to us, and I hand it back over to Nisam for the summary.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. That was brilliant, and I'm sure the people here would have appreciated that. This is not something new. There'll always be multiple branches and people making changes to those branches, and people especially using Git flow and Git as their development environment would really appreciate how this changes the way EA modeling works. So in summary, in this session, what we try to do is, how EA offers a comprehensive modeling support for various domains and verticals, which we all mostly know, and how such a modeling environment can be complemented with additional tools to share, collaborate, and also manage changes. So we looked at the Sparx Systems Prolaborate, which serves as the platform to take the model information, simplify, curate, and engage the right audience to make the right changes without going through a steep learning curve and through a web browser. At the same time, we also looked at Lemon Tree from Liber, which was able to manage this change through Prolaborate and also other changes that Daniel was making in his own version, and resolved all the conflicts at the diagram level, at the elements nodes level, and even at the property level, and was able to let the users determine which goes to the final version or the published version, and also instantly updated the prod environment where people are looking at the model through Prolaborate. So the seamless flow aided with Git integration was demonstrated by Daniel. And this whole use case, is something that we have been specifically requested by a number of system engineering firms, especially using Git as the backend, and various other software development firms who also have this DevOps and Agile environment where every 2 weeks there's an incremental build that's expected to be released. So that's the purpose of this session. And Daniel, would you like to add anything to this, please?
I can say we had at least one very experienced Git user because he caught me with an old slide. My Git flow slide still says master, but for PC reasons, it was renamed to main. And our GitHub repos are already called main, but the slide still says master. Sorry for that. And we also have a question on Git LFS. And this is a very typical question that comes with many deployments. And generally, people ask before starting this. But once they started using it, they don't worry too much about the file size anymore. But we can look into it into more detail for the guy who asked. Yeah. That was for the questions. I have nothing to add to the summary because it's basically, yeah, I know this was a lot of content, crazy lot for the time. So if you want to walk through this in more detail and have your own presentation, feel free to reach out to me or our team, and we will make sure that we can do the presentation in a slower pace and to walk you through all the steps.
Sure, and the recording of this session will also be made available by the Summit team post the Summit with detailed Q&As and inputs from Daniel and myself, just in case if you want to look at it again. And yeah, thank you from my side, and back to you, Juhi.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Nizam. And thanks to everyone for your time during the session. Now, both the speakers will be available in MS Teams to have a detailed discussions and answer any further questions. Once again, the link to Microsoft Teams is pasted in the chat window. So thanks once again, everyone, and looking forward to hosting you all in another wonderful session at this summit shortly. Thanks heaps, Daniel. Thanks, Nizam.
Thank you. We'll connect in
Thank you.
Teams.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.